All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chaney podcast. My name is Nathan Chaney, and I will be your host today and every day. So today is kind of special, though. There's a lot of times where guests that come on the podcast are the first in their category, and today is no different. I don't think I've had anybody in the long career of 55 or so podcast episodes of someone who just really specialized in and represented the sustainability aspect within supply chain and logistics. And although he's had a career that's touched a number of other areas in supply chain, it all kind of comes back to being sustainable and taking care of the planet while we also move our goods and take care of business. So Jochum today is calling in from the Netherlands, and we are kind of longtime mates from CSCMP days. We've seen each other at a number of annual conferences and just saw each other in Verona, Italy at the European CSCMP conference. And we just got to starting to talk about podcasts. And I, as I naturally do, said, come on up and let's have a chat with cameras and microphones on. So Jochum, welcome to the podcast today. I will hand off the digital microphone to you for a couple minutes so you can tell the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nathan. Fantastic to have you to be on your podcast today. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jochum Reuter. As Dutch, we like to have the G like something is stuck in your throat. So Jochum, but Jochum is good. I've been working on a crossroad of supply chain and commercial teams for the biggest part of my career. For the past 10 years, maybe even longer, I've been active in supply chain and logistics, transportation. Before that, I've built teams and organizations in publishing, staffing, and so on, F&B. But I got lucky, right? 10 years ago, I connected to a company called InChange, and I got introduced to supply chain, and I fairly quickly understood that this has a very strategic impact on companies, but also on global consumers. So I kind of got stuck. And I've been a part of supply chain, a part of CSCP also right from the start, really active, really enjoyed that. I built a network across the world and working for companies like InChange and later for Forkites, Faro, Kinexis, and now BigMile has connected me to a lot of companies and people across the world, like yourself. So basically that's me. I'm 59 years old. I live in the Netherlands, married. I have one daughter. My wife has a recruitment agency. In the weekends, I like to go scuba diving if I can. And if not, I like to play golf. And I just got intrigued by your post about pickleball. So maybe I should pick that up as well.
Well, I feel like you can't quite be a proper business person, especially if you're in the world of developing business and that sort of thing. I think you have to golf. I think it's almost like a requirement to really fit into that club of folks. Thanks for the introduction, and you already answered a few of my questions that I would have asked, but we'll try to unpack a couple of them. You're being super efficient, which is a good thing. A couple more questions then for you. Can you talk about growing up? So a lot of the listeners here, for better or worse, are going to be in America or North America for sure. And so I always like to try to uncover what it's like growing up somewhere else and what the culture is like in past times. And also selfishly, I'm looking to move to Europe here in a few years. And so I need to do a little bit of research on where I might want to live one day. So
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit about growing up? You're growing
Sure,
up.
sure. No, I grew up around Rotterdam, Europe's biggest port in the Netherlands. I come from a family where education and innovation is a key. My dad was a university lecturer. My mom was a grammar school teacher. So a lot of teachers in the family. And for them, right, it was important to really be prepared, know your stuff, know what you're talking about, do your research. So that's basically, who I am, where I grew up. It was a fun time. 60s, 70s, not too much rules going on in Holland. Lots of opportunities. I think you've seen all the posts that you see on whatever on Instagram, like kids in the 60s and the 70s. You come home when the lights go on. Wherever everybody's bike was, that's where everybody is. No cell phones. So a lot of freedom. I did my stupid stuff before cell phones, so that was a good thing. And I kind of rebelled against everybody. So, right, it was expected, like the rest of the family, that I would get a graduate a degree, a doctor's degree, probably medicine. And I kind of said, no, that's not for me. I'm more practical. And thankfully, the family gave me the opportunity to do so. The way I grew up was do what you think is best for yourself and don't try to hurt anybody else. That's basically what I right what my basic is. And so I studied. I thought hospitality was my kind of industry where I would love to go. So I picked up a study that's in hospitality. Along the way, I kind of was forced into sales. You don't get forced into sales, but what I mean by that is that my then girlfriend had a father who had his own business. He would drove around with a car filled with underwear, overalls, curtains, and stuff, and he would go from farm to farm and sell it. And he kind of got sick, and somebody had to continue his job, his work, because otherwise there wouldn't be any income. I sort of slowly took over from him, saying, okay, it's just on deliveries. And slowly I started enjoying the whole sales process. And I never stopped selling since. So, that was my time in hospitality. And I've been in sales ever since. First started out in selling pharmaceuticals. I've been selling whatever, security systems. I worked for Coca-Cola. I worked for non-stop staffing services. It was all around sales, business development. And at a certain time, I got the opportunity in publishing for an American company, part of Reed Elsevier, selling psychological assessments, headquartered in San Antonio. And I was allowed to reorganize the sales department. And that's where I knew that I was like, well, I'm not going to say destined, but that's what I was good at, is seeing, okay, but what do our customers really need, and what do they need in the coming 5 years, and how should I adapt my sales cycle, my sales team to really connect with our customers and keep them as a customer. And like I said, right, in 2014, I got lucky and I got connected to the guys at InChange. InChange is a smaller Dutch company selling simulation games. It's a strategic, decision-making game for, well, it's not a game, actually, it's a simulation, decision-making for supply chain. And, that's where I hit it off, and that brought me across the world.
Do you think there's any connection if, just hearing your story and your background and what maybe your parents had kind of set up for you to go on this education path? Do if you think about it in a business or in a corporation, it kind of feels like the sales department is the teachers and educators out there trying to educate customers about your product or service and kind of walk them through the journey of understanding it and onboarding it and mastering it and something like that. So maybe in a way, other than the actual trainers and implementers, I
No,
guess
no, no, I think you're
the
right.
sales function is a bit of a teaching and instructing type of role.
I think you're right. If I, as a salesperson, am not able to explain something about my product in the best possible way so that you understand it, so that it connects to you, right, I'm not a good salesperson. And the same applies to a teacher, right? If I can just throw a lot of theory at you, but unless I make it vivid for you and make it come alive, it's not going to sink in. So I think you're right.
What about for fun? You mentioned that you got into trouble before the age of cell phones, which was good for you. But what kinds of things do you do for fun? And what is like just family life like growing up, near Rotterdam in the Netherlands?
Well, on one side, it was very secure. There were no threats. I could go into the city without any problem, even though, right, there were certain areas where you wouldn't want to go. But I think that applies to all cities around the world. But I feel very safe. And if you do things for fun, what you do then is, well, either you go out, you go to a bar, drink some beers, go to a club. I chose to do a lot of different sports. So I played field hockey, I played ice hockey, I did some baseball, and the only thing I didn't do was football or soccer, as you call it. I suck at soccer, so that's something that I skipped. But I've been a long time hockey goalie for field hockey goalie for a couple of decades.
Okay, so someone from little town East Texas, can you explain what field hockey is? It's not something that we have around here, I think.
Okay, so field. Well, of course you're familiar with ice hockey, but this is just hockey on a grass mat, just like soccer or baseball or whatever. And two teams of 11 people, and they try to score goals on the other side.
And it's a
And
rolling, I guess it's a rolling hard ball then,
yeah, it's a
or
rolling, very, very hard ball. Yeah, it's the size of a baseball, but then
okay.
solid.
Okay. And I suppose if you get hit with it, it kind of hurts, or it's still a little bit like hockey.
Uh,
It's quite physical.
it's I'm lucky the camera isn't that good, but you could see several marks of me getting hit
Uh,
by balls. So yeah,
yeah. Do you wear helmets and stuff, or not so much? Like
just a
how
goalie,
well
just
protected are you?
no, just a goalie, just a goalie
Okay.
is going to be well protected. I would almost wear the same outfit as a hockey player, ice
Hmm.
hockey player,
Right.
when in the goal. So yeah, then you're pretty good, well protected.
I see. Yeah, because you were just like a target, I guess, for this hard
Yes,
projectile
sir. Yeah.
firing at you. So in your travels and in kind of the different roles that you've had,
Hmm.
have you had an opportunity, I guess, to travel around the world? I suppose, or what's your outlook on the world and adventure and travel?
No, I was extremely fortunate at Inchines that I had the opportunity to visit like outstanding academic centers, from Beijing to LA, from Boston to Dallas, Fort Worth, but also in Peru, South Africa. So I've been across the world, seen a lot of different locations and setups, and it's that was well. I've been accused of being a teacher deep down inside by several people, especially CSCMP people, where I enjoy being around students. If you play a simulation game that makes them make decisions on supply chain in companies, it's amazing to be around people that have a fresh and open mind and come up with the wildest ideas where you think, oh shit, that might actually work. So now, that's amazing. So that's what I enjoyed a lot. There's always, of course, different things that are different from being a student somewhere deep down in Morocco. If you're female and brilliant, right, that's very hard to get into universities. I've seen the same hardship of getting into a spot in a I don't know, top university in India, or if you become a student at MIT, the pressure is huge. So that's the downside of these, very esteemed institutes, that the students are under a lot of stress.
You know, I've known you since you were, I've known you for some time. So I knew when you were doing that work before with the simulations and actually at InChange. And now I just finished my master's degree. And in my capstone course, we had to do a simulation where you had to pretend to be the CEO of a company. And you had
Hmm.
all of these, the simulation ran for multiple years and you're trying to maximize profit. And the levers you could pull was marketing and operations and HR and all those sort of
Right.
things. You had to set all these parameters and then hit go and then see how things turned out between you versus all your classmates between
Hmm.
the next year. At first, I thought it was going to be gimmicky or cheesy or something like that. I'm like, they're going to have us play this game. Like, well, this is serious stuff, you know?
I
But it
know.
turns
Right.
out it was one of the best experiences that I had in my entire degree program. Because you could tie your decisions that you have to make to a result that is based on math and science and
Exactly.
best practices.
Exactly.
And it was really, really, I was really impressed with the whole experience
Yeah.
actually. So
No, I fully agree. And I've seen that so many times. So actually, I sort of hustled my way into CSCMP and got the entire community of CSCP at it wasn't called Edge at the time, but at the conference in San Diego, playing the simulation. And that was so much fun because in the game that I was, or the simulation that I was selling, the Fresh Connection, and you have four people making the decisions together: procurement, supply chain, sales, and ops, and together they have to make decisions. And I very distinctly remember that we had a C-level person from one of the larger carriers in I think it was from Florida. So she was handling a company like with 1,000 trucks. And one of the things that we handled in the simulation was delivery window. And after the simulation, so you make your decision, then we simulate like 6 months ahead, and you can see what the numbers are, if you're making a profit or not. And she said, after having made these kind of decisions, I finally understand why this whole delivery window is so incredibly important to my customers. So this is strategic, and people learn, and just to have, and it's fun too. And again, you turn them some, or you tell them, I'm sorry, you're teaching something in a fun way, and that makes it stick.
I like it. I like it. I've found myself really interested in marketing in sales as of the
Hmm.
last couple of years. I've always been in operations. I've always been an operations guy, and just now with starting Supply Chain and all this sort of stuff, I'm now starting to have to put on this marketing and media and sales kind of hat. And so I'm talking with kind of a veteran sales expert. I'm kind of curious on some of your doctrines or ways of thinking about building a sales team and in a tech stack and a culture and all this. Just can you kind of like deposit a few bits of wisdom about creating a sales organization and maybe in logistics and supply chain?
Okay. Well, everybody I've ever worked with will tell you that my mantra in sales is always, if it's not a Salesforce, it didn't happen. So that's number one, right? But fun aside, I think it's important that you build a team that has the right processes in place, so they know exactly what to do, because they represent you when they are out. And you will have good salespeople and not so good salespeople. You will have good salespeople who have an off day. Still, the whole process should be the same. Sales is not magic. It's not like you come around and somebody have the magic. No, it's a process, right? You have to think back. So if you want to have revenue of X, then you find out, okay, so how many customers do I need to have? And what is going to be their business model? And then from there, you count back. Okay, so if I have so many sales that I have to complete, so contracts have to be signed, how many offers do I need to? So how often do I score these offers? Is this like 1 in 10, 1 in 5, 1 in 3, whatever? And then from there, and you calculate back. Okay, so that means that I would have to reach out to how many people, and with who am I successful? Who wants to work with me? And then you find out, okay, so I need to have like 1,000 opportunities or potential customers that I have to act as leads and follow up with them. Okay, so how are you going to do that? How much time does it take to inspire and educate and get people anxious to work with you? How much does it take? How many time does it take? How much people does it take? And then from there, you build it up, your
That's
entire
it's literally
organization.
like, yeah. And would this be called the funnel type of deal? And your total
Well,
potentials.
that's how you get them into the sales funnel. That's correct. Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, you can calculate basically what kind of Salesforce and all this sort of stuff you need to address
Right.
to achieve X revenue. Wow, I've never, again, operations guy here, so that's really
Well,
interesting to
you
hear.
got your operations guys. You love your theory, right? And there's one thing that I use as a Bible. It's actually written by a Dutch guy who lives in the U.S. This is my Bible,
Hmm.
Revenue Architecture. Architecture. It's a great book. Just read it. It will set you up properly.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for the suggestion. So, no, I typically ask, I like to ask every guest, do you have a particular book or quote, that you kind of lean on and that you refer to often? And so, no, again, you studied the layout of the conversation here. So great. So let's talk a little bit about from like a professional development perspective.
Hmm.
You've mentioned being part of CSCMP and that you kind of jumped in. And for those who may not be familiar, that's the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. Kind of like what drove you there? What was the spark that kind of made you go look for a community in the supply chain space? And then kind of like what your experience has been through that time.
Yeah. Um, cool. So I just connected to InChange, and I connected to the guys at the Benelux Roundtable in the Netherlands. We got familiar. I joined some of their events, joined as a member at a certain time. And then there was this smaller conference that they were organizing in Barcelona with the Spanish Roundtable. We had, again, it was, well, sort of at the cross point of getting phones and photographs. We had it one night with a lot of whiskey, and I was sort of like complaining of what I would change if I were in charge. And they said, well, why don't you join our board? And you can make that change. You can be that change. It's like, okay, let's do this. So that's when I joined the Benelux Roundtable board. And I've been connected to almost every roundtable, because I got connected to the girl who was then responsible for the roundtables, and I got to connect to them to play that simulation game where leading up to the San Diego event back when. So that's how I connected to, I think, most of the roundtables in America and South America and Europe. I've been working with the various European roundtables to further develop the CSCP foothold here in Europe, get more people connected, interested. And only, I think, last year, I said, listen, it's been 10 years. Maybe time for somebody new to take over. And I was like sitting back and enjoying the show.
Yeah, it's nice to do that. To be the front man for a bit and then to be the guy behind the scenes and just be able to help us. I feel like it's like being a grandparent a little bit where you are the parent and you are on the front and you are on the clock all the time, and then you get to be a grandparent. You just get to be like, just help, and then just give the kids away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, talking through the CSCMP and kind of personal and professional development, maybe one more question here before we dig into the details of sustainability and carbon footprint and all that sort of good stuff. I see a lot about forkites, and I
Mm-hmm.
see them at a lot of shows. I saw them at Edge, and I interviewed them at Edge last year, actually, in Nashville. And so I'm kind of curious because I think that supply chain visibility, which I think is what ForkGuides kind of does, I think that's a huge buzzword. There was a report that I saw that I read from someone the other day that supply chain visibility is like one of the most, talked about topics in supply chain these
Mm-hmm.
days. So can you kind of like put that into terms or kind of give your thoughts on supply chain visibility and kind of the state of the tools and the technology for that?
Sure. Um, so what I so far seen about real-time visibility or real-time transportation visibility actually is the full term that they use. This is sort of like a solution to the ever ongoing question of where is my load, where is my shipment, and the solution there is that the company tracks the freight because they were able to track the assets on which the load was shipped. It really concluded really fine. It connected really fine with the ELD mandate that was going on in the US at the time. So Forkites was able to track those loads, and in return, we're able to offer that data to their customers, sharing, okay, your load is currently X and it will arrive then and then because we knew we were also connected to the weather, to the traffic, and so on. So we were able to offer real-time ETAs that were very, very precise, and that was new, and it also offered the opportunity to share like a message chain where you would either have a text or an email sent to your end customer saying, "Our shipment is there and there. It will be late." By 30 minutes, so you could prepare. If you have like a retail store and your stock was about to be replenished, right? It was an opportunity to say, okay, so everybody clean the shop. Truck's going to be 30 minutes late, so don't stand around. Do something else. Help customers and so on. So that basically was real time visibility. What we did.
And if you think about it, on the story you just gave a while ago about that carrier in Florida that had that aha moment within Change about delivery windows, so it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's funny, everything that we do in kind of the supply chain world all interconnects and has a touch point with everything else. Um,
Definitely.
so let's move forward a little bit and chat about BigMile and what exactly you all do in this big world of supply chain.
Right. Yeah. So what we do at BigMile is we take almost the same data. So you have a shipment that moves from A to C, right? There are different legs that can be used, different assets, different type of modalities can be used. And we take that data, we look at the assets used, and we calculate the amount of CO2 that has been emitted to get your shipment to your front door. That's basically what we do. We calculate that. It's all based on proper certifications and so on. I mean, you probably believe me on that one, but we're able to offer really good insights on your CO2 emissions on your freight that's been on their way.
Gotcha. I do have a really personal connection here because my second internship that I ever did was at PepsiCo. and
Okay.
I was measuring their carbon foot. I was one of the very first people within PepsiCo to measure their carbon footprint across all their business units across the world. And
Right.
so I was measuring like the carbon output of the Tropicana train that moves the orange juice concentrate from Florida north, and everything that moved, potatoes and chips and Gatorade
Hmm.
and Quaker. It was a massive undertaking. And at the end of my internship, I had to like kind of, I was again the first person I think really that actually did this whole project. And the output was like that the carbon footprint of PepsiCo was bigger than many small countries, just so I really got to see what it's like to do that and undertake that type of effort. Can you talk a little bit about where you see like the traction for this type of
Hmm.
service needed? I'm going to imagine more so in Europe and other sort of like economies that really care a lot and put a lot of stake into sustainability and reporting. But can you kind of comment on that?
Yeah, sure. No, of course. No, BigMile was initiated by the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure right after the Paris Agreements about reducing CO2 emissions and so on. So they thought we need to find a way to really measure the whole CO2 emissions. And until 5 years ago, it became really successful. We had a good project, and 5 years ago, some investors took over, and now we're a commercial company. First off, it were mainly, let's say, the innovative companies, European companies about CO2 emissions that were more important. It was the smaller companies, typical green companies that you see, but we see a shift in the sort of customers that we work with. To give you an example, so far we've been working with smaller carriers, and in Europe, right, the whole Europe transportation world is completely different from the US, where a carrier in the US with 500 trucks is pretty normal. In Europe, we have about 2 million trucking companies, and there's 7 million trucks or 8 million trucks by now.
Wow. Yeah.
So you can imagine that the average trucking company has 3 to 4 trucks.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that's a whole different ballgame. And so first off, right, it were these smaller carriers that we were working with, the greener ones. And now we see a shift towards more companies being made aware that but I think it's a global thing. European consumers are asking for more sustainable products. And if consumers are looking for it, investors are looking for more sustainable products. So I think in the coming 2 years, what you will see is that companies will risk losing investors if they're not getting into sustainability, which forces them to connect with companies like ours. Like I said, where we used to work with smaller carriers, we are now working with global enterprises that want all of their shipments registered and reduced, and want to find a way to reduce their CO2 emissions. So one of the key things that we can do, and I'm currently working with a large car manufacturer that wants to be able to, for every truck or car that they deliver on anywhere on their dealerships globally, they want to have on the invoice, they want to put the exact amount of CO2 that was used to bring that specific car to that dealership. And that's a whole another way of looking at things. One of the examples that I used when I was presenting in Verona was one of our key customers, Mail Uni, which is like a distributor of food products, natural food products. They're using the data that they get from our platform to do a life cycle analysis to be able to share on a product level, share emission data. That's the next step. And that helps them to land more business with companies, first of all in Europe, but the rest will come.
I've recently come across and gotten acquainted with a organization called Deliver, or I guess you might call them a series of events. And you being there in the Netherlands, I suppose you have attended probably because they
I
hold
have
it in
not yet, but we
Amsterdam.
will be there. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So they really interesting business where they're very, very deeply invested in being sustainable, even as a
Mhm.
conference or trade show. And so they I guess they do. And I now maybe we have a conversation about it another time. But they actually like purchase carbon credits to offset the flights and the everything related to putting on the show. Which means
Mhm.
if you're going to do that, then you have to measure and understand what that carbon footprint was in the first place. And so that kind of seems like if you can't manage it if you don't measure it in the first place, or you can't do anything about it. And so it seems like that's where maybe where you all come in is being able to be that first step, at least, of
Hmm.
measuring what it is, and then you can take action on it with those insights.
Right. Well, it's like what you said is true, and it's like what we did with forecasts before. If you don't measure it, there's no way you can change stuff, right? So you need to measure it first, and then analyze it, and then see where you can improve. The other thing is that we keep focusing on sustainability being a European thing, but I think that's no longer the case. So what we see currently happening is that on one end, Europeans are still high in demand because of changes on a global political scale. We are now much more starting to feel a need to be more competitive with everybody else, be able to stand up for ourselves. So we actually see some larger companies postpone being more sustainable and be more competitive currently. And we see an increase in demand coming in from North America. That's funny because that's not what you would expect given the current situation there, current landscape, but it's increasing there. Another thing is what we also see is that freight forwarders from Asia are now changing their routes, wanting to still provide products to North America, but now using Europe as a middle station. So they're adopting CO2 emission information into their system so that it comply with European regulations. So that's
Interesting.
well, you said before, right? Things are interconnected. That there you go.
Yeah, if you're going to drive through my town, you have to follow my town's rules a bit, and that can have
Exactly.
a, effect outside of that area.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, so we've talked through a number of things here today. I imagine we haven't overturned every stone in things that you might be interested to talk about. Is there anything on your mind, or that you'd like to kind of leave folks with as we kind of wrap up the episode today?
Well, I think the main thing for me is that sustainability no longer is a nice to have. Sustainability no longer is something that you do just as a curtain, like greenwashing. People will just see through that and take things serious. Not just if it's not 100% for you to want to save the planet, but make sure you save your business because it's becoming more and more important, and it's going to be crucial in the existing for you in the coming 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, gotcha. I like that. That there is a business case for it as well. I think there's been a lot of research done on it, right?
Definitely.
So, well, excellent. Well, I appreciate you joining in and sharing some of your experience and expertise. Talking a little bit about what was that, the revenue architect of the
Exactly.
book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll probably run into you at the next big CSCMP event somewhere in the world.
Definitely will. You can count on that one. And maybe at the pickleball tournament somewhere will be
Okay.
good too.
All right. All right. It's a date.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Talk to you
Okay.
later.
Good. Thanks so much, Nathan. See you. See you.